finished, then we'll get on with it. Okay, you've had your say, now we might move on. How about we agree we'll give the group over here another minute to chant whatever they want, and then we'll get on with it. There you go. You got a minute? Okay, we've given them all a fair go. Does everyone agree? In a democracy, we actually listen to the majority and what they think. So we'll get on with things. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respect to elders, past, present and emerging. I also want to affirm proudly and clearly my government's determination to enshrine in the Australian Constitution a voice to our national parliament. Together, my friends, we will get it done. We will heed the patient and generous call of the Uluru Statement from the Heart. We will come together as a nation and take the hand that First Nations people have extended to us in an act of profound grace. Because it will be when we join with our continent's mosaic of ancient nations that our modern nation will find our greatest strength, that we will achieve our fullest potential and realise our truest self. We live in the world's greatest nation, but an even greater Australia is so tantalisingly within our reach. And together I know, friends, that we can reach it. And I want to acknowledge today also Blanche Delpouget here representing the late great Bob Hawke. I acknowledge as well our Minister for Indigenous Affairs, the wonderful Linda Burney. Minister for the Arts, Tony Burke's here, and the Assistant Minister for Climate Change, Jenny McAllister. Well, after a bit of a gap, isn't it great to be here at Woodford in person? It's especially satisfying for me to be back here in your capital, Woodfordia, as Australia's 31st Prime Minister. And there were so many things that we missed during COVID lockdown. So one of those things that we missed was the engagement that can only come from being together in person. Yes, you can have contact through online, through Zoom calls and all of that, but nothing beats the coming together of a festival like that. A celebration as well, where we're celebrating the arts. And you don't need to tell me that the arts suffered terribly during COVID, and so much of that suffering was the result of deliberate neglect. One of the things that the previous government never understood is that the arts is not a luxury. The arts are central to our very being. And whether it's our stories being told or our music being played, or our world being interpreted through paint, dance, textile, stone or clay. We cannot separate ourselves from the arts. The arts are central to our culture, and it is through the arts that we build our identity as a nation and as a people. The arts contain, nurture and indeed protect our very sense of self. And it fills me with such happiness to see so many people here again, including, of course, all of the very young ones whose hearts and minds are being filled with the wonder and indeed, yes, the magic of expression, and through that, the wonder and magic of life itself. As many of you are probably aware, I'm a bit of a music fan. Music brings people together with an ease and a power that very little else can. You'll be pleased to know I won't be trying to perform here. As a musician, I'm a good politician. But music does really bring people together. It adds to life's great highs and helps us get through the lows. It lets us celebrate what makes us different and rejoice in what we share. Put it all together and what you have is a spirit that was so perfectly embodied by one person who, of course, made a big difference here at Woodford. One of the biggest Woodford fans of all time, Bob Hawke. Now, Bob left a great legacy, and that's because he understood that for any legacy to have staying power requires a government that lasts the distance. And last time I was here, I spoke about how the strength of Bob's personality sometimes obscured what lay beneath that larrikin, twinkle-eyed surface. At the heart of Bob Hawke was a prodigious dedication to work and to detail, and an energy that he channeled into making life better for his fellow Australians. An extraordinary leader who knew that no leader stands alone. His ministry was one of depth and breadth, and each of those ministers was fully trusted with their portfolios. Bob relied upon them for their expertise and their judgment, and he didn't secretly help himself to any of their portfolios along the way. Above all, Bob's ambition embraced the rest of us, and that's because he knew that we were capable of better, and he knew that we could do it together. The words that characterised his leadership, reconciliation, accord, consensus, were all about us heading in the same direction as a nation. Yes, there will always be times when gaps and cracks open between us, but Bob never sought to widen them in search of votes. Bob was about closing them. The lessons that Bob Hawke taught us are lessons well worth heeding, not just in what we do, as crucial as that is, but also, importantly, how to do it. No one's time in government is infinite. The clock is always ticking, but I firmly believe that a good way to make the best possible use of that time is to carry on with Bob's example. On the 21st of May, the Australian people voted for change. They voted for change for the better. We promised the Australian people that after a lost decade, we would not waste a single day. And from day one, we have done the hard work of building a better future, delivering what Australians voted for. The Labor government has been focused on delivering an orderly implementation of our agenda. And even our critics, of whom apparently there are some here, could not argue that we've sat back and rested on our laurels. We've been working hard. An agenda that deals with immediate and urgent issues, but always giving consideration to how we both anticipate but also create the future. Restoring faith in politics by delivering on our commitments. Inclusive economic growth, social justice, environmental sustainability, and constructive international relationships that enhance regional peace and security. These are the values that will continue to drive our agenda. continue to search for common ground across the Parliament and beyond wherever possible. Collaboration is We've passed a climate change bill and legislated our targets. We've made childcare cheaper, which works for children, works for families and works for our economy. We've established 10 days paid domestic and family violence leave. No woman should ever have to choose between their physical, their emotional and their economic security. We've extended paid parental leave to 6 months, the biggest expansion to it since it was introduced by the last Labor government. And we've worked to expose and close the gender pay gap. If you look across our achievements and our goals, you'll see a common theme is the drive to achieve gender equity. It's underpinned by the budget that was handed down by Treasurer Jim Chalmers in October, a budget that put the needs and aspirations of women front and centre. And I'm proud that these are the achievements of the first Australian government to have a majority of women, which is what we have in the Labor caucus. 54 out of the 103 Labor caucus members are women, a first, and it does make a difference. The majority of parliamentary committee chairs are women. A record 10 members of the Cabinet are women. Add to that the swiftly growing cultural diversity of the caucus that I lead, better reflecting the extraordinary diversity of Australia. New members with surnames like Mascarenhas, Situ, Fernando, Lim and Ananda Raja mean that we are much more representative than has ever occurred since Federation. With a leader in the House of Representatives called Albanese and a leader in the Senate called Wong. We convened the Jobs and Skills Summit, bringing together a great cross-section of Australian society, of unions, of business leaders. We established Jobs and Skills Australia. We've made medicines cheaper from January 1, the first decrease in 75 years since the PBS was introduced. From January 1, 180,000 fee-free take places right around Australia. We said we'd abolish the cashless debit card, and we have. We said we'd expand the Commonwealth Seniors Card, and we have. We've established the Royal Commission into robo-debt, because there are some things that must never be swept under the carpet. We've delivered the regional first home buyers guarantee. We're advancing the voice to Parliament, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the best thing to do. And we've repaired our international relations and got Australia out of the naughty corner. Consider how much the mood has changed in just 7 months of a Labor government. We've gone from a government that treated both climate change and the fate of our Pacific neighbours as a punchline to a bad joke. We've restored our relations in the region, and we have restored respect. We've gone from a government that chose to not have a single conversation with China, our major trading partner, for the entire last term they were in power, to one that understands that dialogue is always a good thing. Australia and China are talking again. I've met with President Xi, which was constructive. A week ago, Foreign Minister Penny Wong visited Beijing. It doesn't mean that we agree with China on everything. We have very different political systems. But it does mean that we should be able to engage in dialogue and raise what those concerns and differences are. We will cooperate with China where we can, we'll disagree where we must, and we'll engage in Australia's national interests. We're undoing so much of the damage that was caused by the former LNP government. We're a mature nation and we're not afraid to act like one. We've established a National Anti-Corruption Commission. Restoring integrity and trust to our politics is essential if we're to maintain the health of our democracy. Those are qualities that went missing in action under the last government. And in their defence of Scott Morrison's multiple ministries, the Coalition have rejected the opportunity to distance themselves from the abuse of power that characterised the government that they were a part of. I urge anyone who thinks that our democracy is unassailable to have a look around the world. Even some of the oldest, most stable democracies have come under attack from a whole range of corrosive, insidious forces. No one is immune. Our democracy is precious, something we have carefully grown and nurtured from one generation to the next. One of our core responsibilities is to make it stronger, and key to that strength is transparency and accountability. The National Anti-Corruption Commission is a crucial step in doing just that. We have passed our Secure Jobs, Better Pay legislation just to get wages moving again. With the help of a special sitting day of Parliament earlier this month, we delivered our energy price relief plan with caps on the price of gas and coal. And now that we've had the legislation passed, we begin the work of putting it into practice. We've done all of that in just 7 months. Quite a lot, I think. But to quote the great Deborah Conway, it's only the beginning. We have established our momentum and we're just going to keep building on it. As we move out of the upheaval of an election year, we will aim to keep delivering on the commitments that we made to the Australian people. The commitments that the Australian people voted for, and that includes addressing the realities of climate change and protecting the extraordinary natural heritage of which we are the current custodians. Unlike the inertia of the previous government, we're serious about cutting emissions. We're serious about tackling the challenges of climate change and finding the opportunities that those challenges can present. We know that the best possible version of Australia's future sees us taking our rightful place as a renewable energy superpower. As a nation, we're blessed with so much sunshine and wind that it would be an act of perversity to not harness them. They are there for the taking. With them, we can drive down emissions. We can drive down power prices for households and for businesses, and we can drive forward a renaissance of advanced manufacturing. With our $20 billion Rewiring the Nation program, we'll bring our power grid into the 21st century, creating the infrastructure for transmission that is essential if we're going to be able to transition. Last week, we announced a major renewable energy partnership with the New South Wales Government, creating multiple renewable energy zones that will create jobs as we build for the future, and taking an important vital step that the last federal government never got around to, which is plugging in Snowy 2.0 into the grid. We're working on similar structures in Tasmania with Marinus Link, in Victoria, where we have just launched the first offshore wind power, and here in Queensland, where in central Queensland you have a massive expansion of hydro and renewable power going forward. These are the hallmarks of our approach. Mutual respect and a national cabinet actually worthy of the name. And each and every decision guided by the national interest, not political self-interest. There is a great future on the horizon, and it is so exciting. Along with all the solar and wind power to generate clean, cheap, reliable electricity we have, with our great abundance of lithium, everything we need to build the batteries we need right here. The batteries to store that power for our communities and our businesses, as well as the batteries to power the electric vehicles, which my government has cut taxes on to make more affordable, just as we promised we would. Cheaper, cleaner energy can drive advanced manufacturing and a future made here in Australia. By using the National Reconstruction Fund, we will support existing industries to transform and new industries to emerge. One of the lessons of the pandemic is we need to be more self-reliant. Put simply, we need to make more things right here. Everything we do to drive down emissions strengthens our efforts to protect our unique natural environment, including, of course, the Great Barrier Reef. Every step of the way we will be guided by reality, by science and by expertise, not ideology. It will be shaped by our conviction that we owe the next generation and every generation that follows nothing less than the preservation of this magnificent land and these mighty seas. We'll continue to act on the urgent challenges facing Australia while building for long-term opportunities. That is why we've created Jobs and Skills Australia to ensure labour market planning maximises opportunities for Australians to secure well-paid jobs, the 180,000 fee-free TAFE places, the additional 20,000 university places, a vision cleaner, cheaper energy being driven to create new industries and then training Australians for those jobs. You can't change it with a slogan. You need to change it with good policies that put in place the transition, and that is what my government is doing. Now, I do want to conclude with this. When Woodford takes place next year, the referendum on the voice to Parliament will have been held. This is an opportunity for all of us to be a part of enriching our nation and being even stronger in the future. There are some who say you might want to have a little bit of respect for what I'm talking about now. Because you probably won't win support for your agenda by yelling out and interrupting, talking about constitutional recognition for First Nations people in this audience. Now, there are some who argue that it's a risk holding a referendum. I assure you of this, we understand that. We understand that there's a risk, but I'll tell you what's certain. You won't get constitutional change without putting it to a vote. That is what is certain. And that vote will achieve two important things. It will recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in our Constitution. But the second thing it will do, and that is all it will do, is enshrine a voice to Parliament to ensure that consultation on matters that directly affect Indigenous Australians, such as education, health, housing and justice issues. We know that we will get better outcomes if people have input into the decisions that affect them. How do we know that? By examining the practice that all of the most successful programs, justice conferencing, Indigenous ranges, they all have something in common, which is they directly empower Indigenous people. It's not decisions made in Canberra or in state parliaments. It's made in consultation together, and we know that that is what works. A successful referendum will give respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, but it will also enhance both the way that Australians see ourselves and the way we are seen by the world. Momentum is growing. Local government, community groups, churches, business, trade unions, sporting codes have all joined every single state and territory government in pledging support for a constitutionally enshrined voice to our national parliament. This can indeed be an inclusive moment of national unity and reconciliation. Now, I respect everyone's right to make their own decision on the referendum, but I encourage Australians to consider the generous and gracious request from First Nations people themselves. As the Uluru Statement itself says, to remove the torment of our powerlessness and to take up the invitation, and again I quote, to walk with us in a movement of the Australian people for a better future. So thank you for having us here today. It is such an honour to come to this event, one that frankly has one of the greatest soundtracks that Australia has to offer, and stand before you as Prime Minister. It is a great privilege, and it's one that I will never ever take for granted. I and every single member of the government that I'm proud to lead will always be guided by the desire to do what is best for our country, to change the lives of our fellow Australians for the better, to do what is right and to do what matters, and without ever seeking to iron out the differences that make our nation so vibrant, strong and attractive. We will always seek out the common ground between us, because that will always be the most fertile place to plant our dreams. My determination has always been that we will be a government for all Australians. It's how we're acting in the Parliament as well. An orderly, methodical government that does exactly what we said we would do, honouring all the commitments that we have made to the Australian people. A government that once again stands firmly on a foundation of integrity, of accountability and trust. We will listen, we will consult, we will keep our doors open along with our ears and our minds. There is a wonderful journey ahead, but we can only travel it together, and I'm very confident that we can. Thanks for having us here today.